was even graver concern over the matter of Della's conduct with those who often crept away into a family's barn late afternoons for a game of Kiss Me Quick. By 15, she was long out of school, shuttling back and forth between her parents, enjoying the attentions of boys alert to her persuasive, unreserved charm. Frisky young Della forestalled marriage until she was 22, an advanced age for espousals at the time. In 1898, she met a house painter recently arrived in Missouri from Indiana named Otis Elmer Monroe, 10 years her senior. Like Della's father, Otis nurtured goals loftier than mere manual labor. He insisted that one day he would study art in Europe, and he spiced their conversations with talk of French painters and of Belle Epoque Paris, of which he had seen gravures in magazines. After a proper courtship, on which the groom-to-be insisted, Della Mae Hogan and Otis Elmer Monroe were married in late 1899. Photographs of her from that time show a woman of medium height, with a strong round face, dark eyes, an almost severe jaw, and extraordinary poise. There is nothing demure in her stance. No portraits of Otis have survived, but Della later described him as fair-skinned, with reddish hair and hazel eyes. He was, she later said, neat as a pin, always turned out like a gentleman, or at least a gentleman's gentleman. After a bad fall, he had a permanent scar on his left cheek, and this gave him a somewhat dashing, romantic look. Della seemed to think of him as a roué, a robust man of the world who had known danger. Not long after the wedding, Otis told Della to pack their clothes. Because he was guaranteed better wages than for occasional house painting, he had accepted an offer to work for the Mexican National Railway. They settled just across the border from Eagle Pass, Texas, in a town later known as Piedras Negras, then called Porfirio Diaz, named for Mexican's incumbent president. Della, at first unhappy to have left America, often stood on her front porch, gazing at the bridge across the Rio Grande into Texas. But she was an adaptable soul, and soon relaxed into her self-appointed role as a kind of unofficial teacher to the Indian and Mexican women, for whom she was also occasional midwife. By autumn 1901, Della was herself pregnant, and on the morning of May 27, 1902, she delivered a child she named Gladys Pearl. A Mexican civil judge certified the birth 5 days later. In 1903, Otis and Della learned that there were better jobs to be had in Los Angeles, where trams, trolleys, and railway cars were proliferating to connect the various sections of that swiftly growing city. The Monroes moved to California in the spring, leasing a small one-bedroom bungalow on West 37th Street in the south-central sector of the city, whence Otis went out to work for the Pacific Electric Railway. With a wife and daughter to support, he found his dreams of painting watercolors aboard a Seine houseboat fading into oblivion. In 1905, Della gave birth to a boy named Marion Otis Elmer, and the family required larger quarters. Family notebooks record that theirs was a peripatetic life over the next several years, and that they lived in at least 11 rented and furnished houses or apartments between 1903 and 1909. With such instability and few possessions to call their own, Gladys and Marion, although not obviously deprived of necessities, had uprooted and insecure early lives. Constantly on the move, as young Della herself had once been, there were also few opportunities to form sustained friendships. In addition, Otis often failed to return from work at night. Just as often, when Della confronted him, he insisted he could not recall where he had been. Because he occasionally drank heavily, Della was not surprised by these memory lapses. The Monroe marriage was thus sorely tested throughout 1907. Then, early the following year, at 41, Otis Monroe's behavior and health deteriorated with alarming rapidity. His memory was erratic, his responses often inappropriate. He suffered severe headaches and became uncharacteristically slovenly. His fits of rage, frightening to Della and the children, alternated with fits of weeping, and the poor man soon developed violent tremors in his hands and feet, sometimes followed by seizures that, at least once, sent 6-year-old Gladys in a panic to stay with neighbors for 2 days. During the summer of 1908, Otis became semi-paralyzed. Admitted in November to the Southern California State Hospital at